I know you know about some of the things that are out there in the market. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to JJ to do that. These are panelists, our moderator. He's going to now these wild tigers who are coming up. If you don't know JJ, he's been in the business. JJ, probably you and I have been in the business really similarly in terms of our lives with Henry. He was former CEO of IT Holdings, which was a company that bought Tasty and all their properties. So he was the CEO there. Prior to that, he was at TD Ameritrade and also Charles Schwab. Now, he is the head of retail expansion and alternative investment products at CMO. If you would, please welcome JJ and his panel. Let him introduce the guys. Introduction. Hello, everybody. How are you? So I'm looking forward to this panel. Three fantastic panelists. And I will let, starting with Peter, I will let you guys introduce yourselves. You know that you better not know you. One of the co-founders of Tradier.
So I'm Rob, and I'm the CEO of BotSpot.
Henry Schwartz, CEO Global Markets Market Intelligence Team. I saw many of you last night, but I'm the guy with the data.
Henry's being actually very modest. I've known Henry for many, many years, and he is the source of data in the industry in terms of what's going on. Everyone always looks forward to Henry's talks, but they're just really amazing. But with all that said, guys, let's get down to it. We don't have a ton of time. So first of all, and I'm going to start with you, Peter. You know, innovation is tossed around all the time. Oh, we're innovating this, we're innovating that. When you think about innovation, is it more making an old product better, and you taking an old product, or is it something completely different that we haven't really?
I think with CL3 happening currently, I think one of the things that's been clear is we've seen a lot of improvement on things like clearing. For example, I think tokenization is going to be big as far as assisting international trading and potentially also giving access to securities that weren't once active. I think binary options is in the shape of prediction markets, and obviously CBOE launched with binaries as well. That's been along for
Thanks for the plug.
Absolutely, it's been around for a very long time, and now coming back. And I think the feeling right now is that it'll be in much better form and more options for retail customers.
Thank you, sir. Rob?
Well, when I think of innovation, I really think of what Jamie Dimon says. It's just cheaper, better, faster. That's all that really matters at the end of the day, right? And we're doing a lot of things to make things cheaper, better, and faster, right? I mean, AI is making things better in many ways. You know, you trade overnight, analyze your bets a lot better. Tokenization is another really big one. Instant settlement. I think it's so crazy that today it takes a day to settle a stock trade. I still think that's crazy. Or over the weekend, right? You have to wait for your money to arrive on Monday. You trade it on Friday, right? So yes, I think there's a lot happening in the space, and just make it better.
I would just add, we now see days where 100 million option contracts trade. This is incredible kind of growth from where we were just like 10 or 15 years ago. And this innovation that we're seeing in kind of every stage of the business is what lets you get effectively instantaneous execution at the price you see, or even better, on the screen. And then, innovation in products and kind of every little piece, and things are just speeding up, which is kind of scary, but also really kind of makes for an amazing experience for the end user.
I'm glad you said scary, Natalie, for one reason. First of all, I think many of us have probably experienced this at some point. And when we think of how fast things are changing, I personally think there's been more change in our industry in the last 2.5 years than at any time during my career. And so with that, Rob, I'm going to come to you is, are we getting too sophisticated? This is coming to a point where for many people it's like, I can't keep up. And I think what tends to happen sometimes is people are like, okay, this is getting over my head. And, first of all, I got to say one thing. I've spent a long time in my career in the retail side of the business. I applaud every one of you. Nothing pisses me off more, quite honestly, than when I hear somebody get on TV and say, oh, the retail dumb money. I'm like, you're an ass. And the reason I say that is because the time you guys are all putting in to understand this stuff. It's not easy to understand. I'm sure many of you are like, oh my God, this is painful. And in many ways, particularly if you're talking about options, et cetera, it's like learning a new language. And the fact that you're all putting in this time, you're all at an event like this to learn, I mean, quite honestly, I can't applaud you enough for that. And part of my personal mission in my career has always been to say how great the retail investor is. And you guys have proved it significantly over the last 5 to 8 years. But with all that, back to my question, sorry for the long winded. Rob, are we getting to a point where things are getting too sophisticated and moving too quick?
So I don't think I think AI has really changed the game a lot, especially with our clients, where a couple of years ago, we've been doing this for, 6, 7 years, educating people on how to trade and things like that. And in the past few years, you're right, it is moving a lot faster, but people are also a lot more educated, right? An iron condor used to be something that was incredibly sophisticated for most people, but now with AI, you can understand it, you understand exactly how to set it up, what deltas you want to use, what are the implications of that, what you want to trade on, what instruments. It becomes so much easier to deal with this sort of thing. So yeah, it is moving faster, but people are also a lot more educated and they're coming to with a lot more information from the very beginning.
Henry, you've been doing this a long time, but don't even think about all the changes you've seen over time. But I think you would agree with me that the exponential nature of the last few years has been incredible. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been at it for 30-something years, and
Started when I was 6.
the growth that we've seen, and actually I did a panel at another event with somebody from an institutional brokerage platform. I mentioned that there's now, you guys may have seen it, 50-something expirations in a product like Spot. There's actually 52 expirations. And so the old kind of style, if you're old enough to know what an option grid looks like, and you're scrolling through prices and you're looking at, here's an option that's one bid at 110 and I might trade it. And somebody at the panel said, it's not how it works anymore. The 2 million listed option contracts that are available to trade, he said those prices are being put out there for AI to read. So it's not the prices are there for you and me to go, I want to trade this contract because it's a 21 delta and it's a $1 bid. And that's an incredible kind of generational shift. And it's, for kind of some of the dinosaurs, it's hard to get used to because you're still used to looking at an option price. But man, for the younger or whatever, the newer generation of traders to take advantage of tools like, hey, this is my my investing thesis. Here's my goal. Here's my risk parameters, and have it basically produce the trades that you then can choose to trade or automate. It's kind of mind-blowing.
All right, before we get to Peter, you got to understand how working he is, by the way. He's not only president of the brokerage, COO, he's out reading people, stuffing envelopes, doing everything. So with all that,
Thanks. I think, from a trading perspective, I want to echo what they said. I think, retail traders are engaged. You guys are paying money to be educated. You're taking time to educate. Trader believes in this and obviously wants to facilitate that. So my comments will be less about you not being aware of the product. It's more about you being aware of the vendors you're using downstream for things. I think crypto taught us a very valuable lesson as it relates to that, knowing who's holding your securities, making sure you're comfortable. I think also offshore firms, making sure you're trading with U.S. firms. And I think we're going to touch on regulation in a bit, but I think it's incredibly critical for us in the U.S. to sort of be a foundational place where people come from around the world to trade. So I think the only thing I would say that I'm somewhat concerned about is some of the private securities that come out, and I'm sure retail customers are aware of the specifics of the securities you're trading. I think solid disclosures and solid education on what these things are, what they mean, and how liquid or illiquid they are is going to be really critical. So
I think the liquidity is an unbelievably important factor and probably one that I think many retail traders actually underestimate. It was interesting. We had Hotel California playing here a second ago, and all I could think of is please never get in those positions where you can check in but never leave. And unfortunately, there are a lot of products like that. So always be this. I really think being the smallest fish in the biggest pond it is a beautiful place to be. No one cares that you're there, and that's perfect because everyone else is maybe really tight markets. But as we continue to think about innovation, Henry, as you look around and you think about all the stuff that is changing, what products do you think are missing right now, or what are you looking at on roadmap, et cetera, and saying, okay, over the next 6 months, a year, this is something that I really think needs to be out there to help us get.
Well, I mean, we're seeing, it's funny, because for the first 25 years of kind of my career, the big brokerage firms were basically terrified of options. We would talk to Schwab, we would talk to kind of some of these original firms, and you could just tell they were like, this sounds like gambling, or it's so complicated, we're afraid our customers are just gonna lose money. And the truth is, the kind of the upper management of those firms, they weren't comfortable with options. And that's really, really changed. And you have, firms like Tradier that are not afraid to basically say, look, let's work on how these educating people. But this is really new. This has only been happening for 6 or 7 years. So, to see that, and that is thankfully kind of pulling along some of the more traditional brokers. So, I think education and then and automation and we all talk about, the way to properly manage a trade and manage your, those things you're not supposed to do. Don't trade emotionally. Don't double down if you're getting killed. And that can actually be built into the trading strategy, and you take the emotional part out of it. And that to me is like, just kind of automating the smart way to do things is phenomenal.
Absolutely. So Peter, it's such an appropriate question for you as head of product. What are you, with the Tradier, what are you guys looking at over the next 6 months, et cetera? I know you're probably talking about some of that in other panels.
Sure.
So,
When we started the firm about 14 years ago, API was a sort of focal point of the firm. We wanted to facilitate trading platforms for educators, for third-party platforms that develop tools. And over time, folks' account access has been so much more available in different ways than they have been previously. And so I think MCP serves, which is something you can do from time to time, which is basically an easy way for someone who's not developer-centric to access their account, maybe make prompts to make requests against trades they've done, get more detail with regards to the performance on these trades. I think that the way clients engage with their accounts will change dramatically in a very short period of time. And that's not just from a trading perspective, it's getting insight on behaviors you see when you're trading, see when you're making sense, making the right choices, when your behavior is changing as to what you want. Henry makes a great point with automation, like taking the human thought out of some of these things is good, but if you want to be involved, retrospectively looking back, say, why did I do this differently than I normally do, and try to teach them going forward not to make those mistakes.
all right, Robert, and these guys set you up a little bit for some of this question already, haven't they? But at BotSpot, what do you guys got on the roadmap for this?
Yeah, so I mean, we're heavily focused on AI. It's making all that stuff a lot easier. There's tons of things to do. It's funny whenever I tell people we do AI trading, everyone's like, oh yeah, I get it. But the truth is that it goes very deep. There's a lot of different things they can do with AI. MCP servers is one of them. We actually just launched an MCP server, and it's really cool because you could be in ChatGPT or on Claude or whatever, and you can actually just trade directly through those platforms, which is really powerful, right? Or a lot of people are using OpenClaw, and they're able to use MCP servers with that. Sometimes it's better or worse. There's some trade-offs there. But I just see AI just speeding things up dramatically. And to your point, we're saying, automating trades. I mean, that's our bread and butter, right? The whole reason why we started this thing is because you want to know ahead of time, what you're getting yourself into, right? A lot of people just wing it. A lot of people just say, hey, I'm going to trade this option because I feel like it, right? But did you back test it? Did you see if this is even a good idea? Like there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare yourself for this without just jumping in, feet head first into a shallow pool. Let's do a little bit of research around this ahead of time. And I think AI is really helping a lot with all those types of things.
So I'm glad you talked about that with the jumping head first into the pool, because first of all, we've all been guilty of it. And then you say, they screwed me. But anyway, all that said, obviously you guys do a lot on education here, and how are you continuing to think about, as you develop these new products, to make people comfortable with them through education? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, and one of the things we're trying to do is do a much better job during our onboarding process to make sure clients are aware of our products, what we have, what we can do. We obviously leverage a lot of third-party educators as well to help spread that message as well, and sort of find our traders at home, where they feel most suited as the strategies they want to deploy. I think with all these products, I think it's paramount to make sure they educate. And I also think too, from a data perspective, like giving them new insights and feeds. One of the things I'm very excited about is sort of how prediction markets can play. I know a lot of folks are talking about contracts that don't like, but I think there's a lot of contracts that we will like. And a lot of contracts will give us a real insight into our trading decisions, allow for real hedging on things. And I think that we need to sort of put a good message around retail traders as far as like where we think this makes sense and how they can use it effectively.
Rob, you talked about it a little bit in your last, but in terms of further education, what do you guys look at? And AI in general, I think, is something that people, to me, that's one of those things where people are like, oh yeah, I'm using AI. We can touch on a little bit. There's so many different levels of it. And what's actual AI in terms of how you can sort of get started and really help yourself versus actually confuse the hell out of yourself. How do you guys, help people with that journey?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we started as an education company, right? So we started off by teaching people how to write Python code to basically back test your strategies and automate them for you. That's an education in itself, but you learn a lot when you use code or you use something like that to actually back test or to analyze how to actually place a trade correctly and that sort of thing. And AI allows you to do that very, very easily now. Right, but when it comes to AI in the education space, I mean, you can use AI to teach you about a specific topic. That's one thing that you can do. You can use AI to build something for you, to automate it for you, right? You can use AI to back test and like basically try simulations. Like, what if I did this or what if I did that? There's a lot of different ways that you can use AI to educate yourself. I think most people just use ChatGPT to ask questions. Right? It's just like. It's not just a fancy Google, right? There's a lot more that you can
Which is
do.
what most people actually are using it for, let's be honest.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, and Henry, you probably have a different take on this because you're not only helping to educate clients, your role is a bit of a hybrid, but you're also helping to educate the industry. And how do you go about looking at this in terms of helping to educate other professionals in the industry versus educating those who are the end retail client?
Well, I mean, there's been, the democratization of finance is kind of, a buzzword that's been around. On the AI side, the ability, the ability to kind of have a conversation with the data, to me, is what's very exciting. And there's actually a weird little niche called P&L attribution analysis, which I know some friends in New York that set up these companies and actually kind of copying some models that they learned at Goldman Sachs and places. But this concept is nice and simple. Like, okay, look at your trades for the last 6 months. Tell me, where did I actually make money? What did I do wrong? And it's very funny because in options, as there's you can make money in delta, you can make money in theta, you can make money in vega. People have different approaches, different goals, different styles. But at the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, you made $400, but how did you make it? And even on the earnings trading demonstration this morning, like, I get it, I know people that trade earnings, but how can you take that apart and really figure out, okay, where are you making your money? What are you good at? And what could you have done better? So to me, it's really, I use the word pro-tail for kind of this really, probably this community is the perfect example. The concept of dumb retail, I'm sure there's still some dumb retail out there, and
There's dumb everyone.
yeah. I mean, there's dumb institutional traders too, but you have the ability for people to be, have tools that are just as good as the institutional tools. The things that we've spent decades kind of working on and adjusting volatility skews and everything else is now very, very easy to source. And so, just to me, kind of seeing there's not much of a difference between what a lot of the institutional traders are using to make their decisions and what the retail or the self-directed traders are, or the algo-based. It's all just kind of become a spectrum.
Well, I agree 100%. I think the tools that you guys get, Tradier, et cetera, it's unbelievable. I was on the floor for 21 years trading options, and the tools you guys have are 10,000 times more sophisticated than we ever had on the floor.
And they're free.
And they're free. And it's really unbelievable. And speaking of something like that, Robert, as you think about, as you're rolling out products, et cetera, you talk about things you have, what's the most difficult part of rolling out a new product? Because we talk about these great tools, but we also know it's hard to get these tools out and to get people to use them. How do you think about that?
There's a lot of stuff that's hard about it. Compliance, safety is something we think about all the time, right? How do we make sure that people don't blow themselves up? You know what I mean? Because even if you have AI, people, it's not that people are dumb, it's that people sometimes are reckless, right? I think that's the difference, right? And even if you're highly educated on a topic, you're still prone to that gambling mentality. You know, and that goes all the way up to Goldman Sachs. They make the same mistakes. You know what I mean? It's not just retail traders. We're all human, right?
We've democratized numbers too.
Yeah, so that is very important, you know, making sure everything's safe, secure, compliant, and you know, make sure that people don't blow themselves up. I think it's kind of thing that we think about a lot. And maybe futures data, I feel like it's pretty difficult as well, just as a side note. But I mean, yeah, it's really more about that, making sure that people are not blowing themselves up.
Well, I mean, at CBO, one of the big challenges is we roll out new trading products. So things like the Mag 10 index options, or even products that exist that people don't know about, like was the XSP, which is a mini SPX, which is super similar to SPY. You know, SPY trades 8 or 9 million contracts a day. XSP, which is kind of an index version of that, trades 300,000 or 400,000 contracts a day. And so trying to get people to kind of learn about the new things that are out there, and just kind of expand their attention a bit is, to me, that's kind of, that it's tough because, I invented a little data platform which became part of CBO, and the platform was great. I have no hesitation about that, but getting people to get used to doing something a little new, great isn't enough. It needs to be amazing to get people to kind of change their focus and start paying attention to something new. And so, to me, that's a big hurdle that we're kind of always trying to get over.
Then you designs product all day and rolls it out to all these great people. How do you think about this?
I mean, I think design's critical. I think some of these products trade in a manner that's different than I was accustomed to. So sort of building things that are easy to understand, easy to process, utilizing AI and AI tools to help teach how to use these things is really critical. I also think right now that there's a lot of different things happening in different parts of the space. And I think from a firm perspective, focusing on the right things, trying to figure out what our clients want and need, and making sure we're focusing first on the things that are most critical, and then obviously branching out with other items as well.
And one of the things I think I would say to everybody is you have all these amazing tools, and it's cool to try some of them, but don't get frustrated if you're like, oh, I have to use this, I have to use this, I have to use this. I think sometimes people overwhelm themselves. And really, I would say use one, kind of get used to it, go on to the things you're comfortable. And I'm sure you guys talk about this a lot. I've seen this a lot in my career where people are like trying to use 7 different tools, and at the end of the day, they're like, this stinks. And it's like, well, it only stinks because you overwhelm yourself by trying to do too much. Again, if you take your time, this isn't the easiest thing in the world.
And one piece on that point that we struggle with that as a firm. There's a lot of firms that have been around for a very long time, some of which JJ's worked at, that it's very difficult sometimes to capture that audience as they get very used to the tool that they've been using. And that tool may not be innovated on as much as ours, but it'd be a very hard sometimes bringing those folks on if they need to learn something new. And I think from our perspective, really focusing on how to make it, accessible, visible, something that we're really keen on doing.
And I'm going to start with the next question, because I know you have a lot of strong feelings on it. You and I have had the conversation. And that is, does regulation hold back innovation? And maybe not intentionally for regulators, but I mean, how much time do you have to spend not only educating clients, but educating regulators that you're like, oh, there's nothing nefarious about what we're doing here. We're trying to help people overall. How does that factor into what you guys are?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes regulation is needed, and that's why it's the greatest market in the world. And I think that, I do want to applaud regulators right now for moving quick as far as this particular group is concerned on the PDP stuff. Like, this is something we've been struggling with for years and years and years. And it hasn't been quick as far as getting done, but this group has come in and made really good changes. So I would say from my standpoint, like, having an open door to these firms is important, making sure they understand what we're doing, what our concerns are. And we've seen over recent years that the regulators we deal with are much more open to these conversations. I think one of the other things too, which is a different type of regulation, is market data regulation. I think the way that folks ingest data and use data is far different than it's ever been. And I think as an industry, we need to work together to figure out the right pricing structures and the right use structures of market data with all exchanges, so we can figure out how to most effectively get information to our customers and allow them to trade, which is obviously.
I can tell you one quick history of PDT story. So I was part of a group that went the first time to FINRA. 9 years ago, we went to FINRA on PDT for the first time. They told us, it's not our priorities. And so finally, we got to your point, new leadership that was like, this is the dumbest rule ever. So the rule when it started was a good one, but it was maybe 2000. The world has moved on. So Rob started off on a tangent, but to you. So what do you, again, you guys rolling out a lot of new products, particularly AI, which I think for regulators is probably refreshing because they don't have the full understanding of it. In their defense, their systems are not nearly as up to date as yours are going to be. So how do you help educate them?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, I do think regulations definitely go in the right direction. I definitely like the changes to the PDT rule, tokenization, prediction markets as well. Definitely we're going in the right direction. Trusting people a little bit more. I think it's kind of crazy that, just because someone doesn't have a $25,000 account, they can't day trade. They might be one of the best traders out there, but you never know, right? So I think there's better ways to go about doing that. But then in terms of the AI side of things, I think a lot of people mistake what AI really is or what it can be, right? Because a lot of people think especially when I tell them we do AI trading, they just say, oh yeah, well you let the AI kind of do whatever it wants, right? Which is just not true, right? There's kind of two ways that we look at it, right? Which is AI producing a strategy that's deterministic. So I'm going to use AI to create something that is going to execute in a very specific way, right? So if the VIX is below this, and it's Tuesday at 3 p.m., and this, it's very deterministic. You're just using AI to do the research and to build the thing for you that can automatically run it, right? But what we've been getting into more lately is allowing the AI to actually start placing the trades. This is something that's newer for us, but I think the AI models have gotten to the point now where they can actually listen to instructions well enough. They don't make mistakes as often as they used to, right? A lot of people are still thinking, I used ChatGPT 2 years ago and it told me this crazy stuff. But if you use the latest models, like GPT 5.5 is really, really smart. And if you tell it to do something, the chance of it actually executing that is like 99.999%, right? So I think people are, first of all, misinterpreting the fact that, you could use AI to build a deterministic strategy that just executes for you. But then they're also missing the point of how much smarter these models are getting and how much faster that's developing.
Well, I would say if you like these kinds of conversations, there was a panel, an SEC roundtable panel on options markets. JJ was one of the participants on. The videos are posted on YouTube. I think if you Google SEC options roundtable, the links are pretty easy to find. It's like 6 hours of discussion about things like PDT and how the market works and where the market's going. And in terms of the way the regulators see the business, and it's absolutely true. We think in terms of options all day long. They don't. They're also regulating a whole bunch of other things. So the fact that the regulators have kind of come around to like, okay, these products, in some ways, the notional volume in SPY options exceeds the SPY ETF volume by 16 times. Okay, keep that in mind. I think you can talk about the tail wagging the dog. Options are a massive part of the market. They're the biggest kind of contribution to earnings for some of these brokers as well. So we see the regulators, they're at least comfortable with what's going on. And then, you talk about kind of this confluence of event contracts and just other ways that people are committing capital and expressing their investing views. And then, the last thing I would say is the U.S. markets and groups like Tradier, there's a free-for-all trading venues in these overseas markets where they don't know who the customers are, and you can connect a crypto wallet and trade like crazy, and who knows what's really going on there. the US markets with we have regulation, which makes it a little bit safer, but we also kind of have the care of kind of the brokerage community actually really caring about, like, let's not do things that are so reckless that people are going to start trading 6x levered ETFs. Because if we listen to them, they would. But there's enough sense here to go, like, hang on a second, that's kind of over the line in terms of what we're comfortable with. So.
And I think you bring up an important point, Henry. Sometimes you read articles, whatever, how reckless the brokerage industry is, et cetera. It's like, listen, you have a trader here doing this, spending their time, making sure people understand things. It's really hard to get new clients. And the worst thing that can happen to you as a brokerage firm is that you get a client and they blow out, or, and right away they're gone. It's your absolute worst nightmare. And it's why they're spending all this time to make sure that people do understand things and really applaud them. And, I think people really have to understand. When they say they are invested in your success, 100% they're invested in your success because they just spent a lot of marketing dollars and everything else to make sure you are successful and to give you the best possible tools. So I really think people need to understand that, and I don't think there's enough of an understanding of that overall. That all said, so guys, we're here in a year. What is, like right now, I think the hot topics of, 24/5, 24/7. So I'm gonna make this a two-part question. Number one, when do you think we'll go to 24/7? Because I'm not saying if. And number two, what will be 1 year from now, the topic everybody's talking about?
Yeah, I think next year will be 24/7, if not potentially sooner. I think trading equity across the board at all times is critical. I also think trading options at greater times is critical as well. Not to go again, but like the curve session that was recently launched with SPX and VIX, trading hours, like we want to get more accessibility for more time. As we've seen recently, like events happen at all times. You don't want to wait till 9:30 to take action on your positions, if you can take action immediately. So I think it's prudent for everybody to be able to have access as well. So I think next year it'll be something that will be top of mind for us to get moving on, and I think that retail traders will cherish and have that access available to them in the fingertips, and will give us obviously more global reach as well.
Well, tokenization is going to allow 24/7 very soon, right? I think in a couple of months it's going to be allowed, right? There's definitely a lot of really great stuff happening right now in the industry. One of the things I'm most excited about is prediction markets, right? Like the amount of people banging on our doors talking about prediction markets is crazy. And one thing I actually find nuts is poly market is not even technically legal in the US, but it's on all the different sports channels. I don't know about you guys, but I watch the All In podcast. They talk about it all the time. It's almost like it's already legal, but it's not. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff coming down the pipe. Prediction markets is definitely one of them. Tokenization is another. So there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff.
I would say that the prediction markets event contracts with SIBO, we're going to have ours, this summer as well. And the fact that brings kind of a new audience in, right? If you trade options, you get very comfortable eventually with vertical spreads and kind of how these things behave. But there are a lot of people, millions of people that they never traded a call, but they're a little bit freaked out by that. They want a little bit of a stepping stone. And actually at cocktails last night, I traded 2 event contracts on captions because I was trying to show it to somebody else. I was sitting next to Jason DiLorenzo, who knows baseball, and the Miami game was on, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I think Miami's in position to win." Made $35 last night while I was sitting there. It's all kind of coming together. So to me, the 24/7 question, we're getting sucked there by crypto and overseas markets that offer it. And I like when the bell rings at 4 o'clock or 4:15 to be able to kind of exhale and be like, all right, I don't actually have to pay attention to this right now. I was on vacation 2 weeks ago with somebody else who's kind of active in the market, and every day at 4 we looked at each other and said, market's low. So
this is why I need AI to help you out.
True, but that might be too late for my brain. But for kind of the newer generation of traders, it is going to be 24/7. Maybe next year, maybe the year after. I think we're going to be very careful with liquidity and not having people step into, a Hotel California type of trade where they pay, $2 for an option and nothing's moved and it's a 50-cent bid and it's just an absolute ripoff. That's how the market used to be when we started, 30 years ago. You had to make back a quarter bid offer just to scratch. And, now, thankfully, like the markets are so efficient, we see people scalping pennies, which is unheard of. You used to be commissions and bid offer made that impossible. Now it actually is part of the market. So we'll get there soon. I think we need to kind of all work together to get there, smoothly, so it doesn't just become a, fiasco. But I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that can brings up one really quick great point, and it's every major regulation that's happened in the market in the last 40 years has been in favor of the retail trader. And I really think that as we've seen over the last few years, the importance of the retail trader in the market has never been greater, and it's fantastic. With all that, how about a hand for these three gentlemen?
All right, we have time for a question or two, if anyone has one. You thought you were leaving.
Sorry, I haven't told.
You raise your hand, I'll come to you.
All right, let's see.
So only him.
Darth Vader.
All right, let's try. Okay, we'll do a little song here too. As probably the oldest guy in the room here, I am not in favor of 24/7 trading. I got records going back to 1978. Okay, when I got a monthly statement at the end of the month, and I put it in my computer and whatever was around. So, how are you going to get a monthly statement now if the market never closes? You never know what you're worth. Plus, you want some time off too. I travel extensively, and it's hard enough to keep up with stuff when I'm on the road. Now I got to work about 7 days a week.
I think the concept of additional hours trading has existed for some time in the future. So there's folks that are sort of participating in such a wide window. Totally appreciate wanting to be able to turn it off. And obviously, there'll be processes as it relates to when months start and end from a settlement perspective, the statements. But I think it's inevitable at this point, based on how many people around the world want to trade, that we're wanting to give folks access to our markets as long as possible. I think if we don't give them access here, they'll get access most likely offshore in a place that we can't control this type of. So I think from an industry standpoint, I think that there's enough folks out there that are interested in this. I think eventually there'll be enough liquidity. I think we're trying to sort of put that in the framework that we're used to here from the U.S. and our existing regulators.
Can I add something to that? I think that, I mean, we all agree, we want some time off, right? And it's just happening less and less and less. That's maybe sadly the way of the world. But the fastest area of growth in trading right now is South Korea in the U.S. markets. And they want to trade when they're away. And, as we've continued to see, and Peter said it earlier, these are the best markets in the world because they are regulated, because people do trust them, because you as a retail trader feel like you're getting a fair shot. That doesn't exist elsewhere in the world. So the rest of the world wants access to our products, as well as the biggest companies in the world are all here. So one thing that's crypto, whether we like it or not, one of the things that the market is taking from the crypto markets is that the demand is there and people everywhere in the world want to be involved there. So I asked the question purposely, not if, but when. There is no question that the pressure to do so exists, and the market is going to respond to that pressure so that everyone in the world has access to the U.S. markets, because that's what this country wants.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, if you want to see what a monthly statement will look like, you just have to look at the crypto markets, right? I mean, Coinbase and all these guys they've been doing this for a while. They give you monthly statements. So if you want to see what that looks like, that's where you have to look. And then in terms of you want to take a break, I mean, I get it for sure, but just because the markets aren't trading doesn't mean prices aren't reacting. right? So I mean, it could be a weekend and a war breaks out or something like that. I mean, you can't trade it, but the price has definitely shifted. On Monday morning, it's already moved. You didn't have a chance to react to it. So I mean, I get the urge to take time off and all that stuff, but I mean, the truth is that you never really had that. You just didn't have the liquidity.
I do have one in the back of the room right here.
BJJ is a trusted and regulated exchange from the CBOE perspective. Obviously known for derivatives. What's the CBOE approach and perspective around binaries and predictions and that's there?
So we're gonna start the binary prediction market June 15th. We are not going to include sports or much to maybe my personal chagrin, the color of Taylor Swift's dress at the Emmys. But, you know, and we do believe that products that are geared toward the markets, it's that, you know, we're gonna start with the XSP, which is, as we said earlier, is the mini SPX. And we will have our yes, no's on there, but we're also gonna have something called the plus zone, which is basically a vertical spread built into there. Because I think, you know, Robert and Peter both touched on the fact that prediction markets are going to be the greatest source of new options traders, because I think you guys have probably experienced this in your career of trading. You trade something and you're like, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. Is there something more here? And I do believe that by starting in prediction markets, people are going to learn how to trade options and trade them the right way. And by the end of summer, we'll be trading KPIs. That is for Tesla, how many cars will they sell in a quarter? Think of the things that really affect their earnings. And the difference is we're going to do this all on the security side, not on the future side, whereas everybody else is on the future side. And the last thing on sports, I was on a panel recently and somebody said, why aren't you doing sports? I said, I'm a traditionalist. What do you mean, traditionalist? So when I've been on sports, I wanted to be with a gentleman whose last name ends in a vowel, has had his nose broken at least twice, and is loosely associated with the import-export business.
And I'll chime in a bit on that too. We are planning on offering this as well by the end of the year. I think one of the other things we're trying to do is give as much exposure as possible to the data of these contracts as well, and hopefully that information will help make traditional decisions on securities that they're trading now as well. That information. We are working with CBOE to get their contracts out among other exchanges as well. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be offering it on our platform as well.
I think we had a question off my right. Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's pretty much related to my question because I hear it well. Like I don't know how true it is that we could have different expirations during the day, different times of the day. So if that's true, if that's you guys are exploring that, so it wouldn't become something more like binary options than other things.
I can respond to that. The concept of hourly options, and for a little while, they were on kind of the drawing board at CBOE, and they were going to call them nooners, and some people were like, yeah, I'm not quite you know, one of the things about, you know, I mentioned last night, SPX, incredibly liquid, you know, $18 billion a day in premium trading, you know, in about 4.5 to 5 million contracts. And we do care about concentrating that liquidity. So I've traded hourly options. They do exist on Kalshi. I've kind of played around a little bit. They're not very liquid, and you know, a little bit as the gentleman was saying, you know, it's kind of arbitrary. Where's SPS going to be at noon? Where's SPS going to be at 2? I don't think we're there yet. It's kind of hard to think of what the true economic case is for something like that. You know, we really do. People should have the freedom to do what they want with their money. But, you know, at CBOE, you know, we are a financial exchange. So we are there for people to make capital to kind of purposes that make sense, some fundamentals. And that's why there's hedging. Speculating is fine, but truly just like, you know, coin toss about where are we going to be 10 minutes from now. I don't think there's that much demand. We're not talking about doing nooners anymore anyway.
Appreciate the take on all of this, guys. To the gentleman.
We should be able to full master.
You know, I mentioned last night, if there is a data source that really do disclose how much flow is coming from the retail brokerage community. We know there's professionals mixed in there. You know, I use retail brokerage accounts. I don't really consider myself retail. It's currently basically 50 or 60% of the market in terms of volume. That's an incredible growth from, you know, it used to be 10 or 15% just about 10 years ago. So, you know, that's coming from the meme stock craze and COVID helped, but also just the compression of commissions and the ability to trade effectively for free through a lot of venues has brought in an enormous amount of new retail. And you have this shift. We went from, you know, a pretty small group of kind of old white guys trading options to a much more diverse community. You know, things like Reddit and education efforts by the brokers. It's you know, retail really does kind of that is the big source of growth in the industry in the last 5 years by far. Institutions are still using options and there's growth there too. But it's more than half of the market currently, and in some products in the SPX 0DTE complex specifically, especially because of things like, you know, condor trading and systematic kind of quantitative strategies. Retail is about 62% of the SPX 0DTE, which itself is more than 60% of the total SPX.